Hello, AP Macro students. It is me, Mr. Sanabria. I am recording after quite a break from doing my recordings. I am now recording the remainder of the videos at long last. So today, the moment we've been waiting for a very long time in an AP macroeconomics class, we are going to finally start to talk about money. Well, we've been talking about money a lot, but we haven't actually defined it yet. We don't know what it is. You don't really know what money is yet. You use it all the time. You have a pretty good idea, and I'm not going to insult your intelligence and pretend you truly don't know what money is. But in an economic sense, and in terms of what role money plays in an economy, you probably do have a less than complete understanding of money. And because we are about to get into monetary policies and manipulating the money supply, I think now is a really great time for us to go ahead and really explain and understand for ourselves what money is. So, without much further ado, let's go ahead and talk money. And we'll start our conversation on money the way we often start a conversation, by defining what it is. So money, as you can see, is anything that can be used as all of the following three things: a medium of exchange, a store of value, and a unit of account / standard of value. So what I want to do is go one by one through those things and talk about what exactly they mean. So a medium of exchange means that it is a thing that you can exchange for some other thing. It's a medium. It's a go-between. You know, I've probably said it in class before that no one actually wants money. People want what money can get you, right? And that's what this idea of medium of exchange is really getting at. If you ever saw the movie Ghost, you know that Whoopi Goldberg's character is a psychic medium, right? It's a go-between. The Patrick Swayze's character didn't want to talk to Whoopi Goldberg. He wanted to talk to his ex-wife or girl. I don't remember the movie that well, but you understand what I'm saying. Like the character of the medium is simply a go-between, and that's how money is. I don't want money. I want money to be my go-between between the thing that I actually want. So I have something of value, probably my labor, and I want to exchange my labor for food. But I don't just write up a "I will work for food" sign and try to directly turn my labor into food. I turn my labor into money, and then I can use that money as a medium to buy myself food and travel and clothing and housing and everything else that I use money for. So that's the first thing. Lots of things in history have been used as mediums of exchange. There's even examples of cultures using seashells as a medium of exchange. We'll talk about that later. So it's a thing that I can give you to get something else. Number two, money is a store of value. So money, simply as a medium of exchange, wouldn't actually be that useful or effective as a money system, because we need our money to also store value. And what I mean by that is, if I have some stack of money, whatever money that may be, and I leave it alone for a certain amount of time, I want it to still be worth something when I get back. So let me give you an example of something that could be a medium of exchange, but not a good store of value, and therefore not money. Let's say that I had some students come to my classroom and help me decorate and put up some stuff around the walls, and instead of paying them, because I don't think I'm allowed to do that, I gave them all some pizza. Well, it is conceivable that some of my students could take their slices of pizza, go to another room, and exchange those slices of pizza for, I don't know, tutoring help from a peer or something. I don't know, I'm making up an example here. Well, that's great. Pizza is a great medium of exchange, but how long does pizza store its value? Some of us push the limits for several days, but really pizza doesn't hold its value much longer than about a day before it's just, you don't want to eat that. So it's not a good store of value. In fact, food has often been used as a means of paying people and at the same time keeping them oppressed, because you generally cannot store food, and so you cannot accumulate wealth if you're being paid in food. Sure, you can subsist on it, but you cannot store that value. Money allows us to store value. A stack of $100 bills today will be worth a lot of money in the future. Now, I kind of paused there because we've come across something here. There is a problem with money storing its value that we've talked a lot about already, and what do you think I'm talking about? Inflation. So, an inflationary economy is threatening one of the very things that makes money money, and that is its ability to store value. So a very inflationary currency is actually starting to become an ineffective form of money. So just kind of an aside there, but you can see, kind of a linkage. So I've got my money here. I use it as a medium of exchange. I can exchange dollars for tacos. I could also choose not to exchange that money today. I could store the money and it will hold its value relatively well, and we've kind of caveated that with inflation. And finally, there is this concept that money is a unit of account / standard of value, and this, I think, is the most underappreciated, underrecognized function of money, but it may actually be the most important. Maybe I'm exaggerating if I say most important, but it is equally important to the other two. And when I say that money is a unit of account, what I mean is that when I say, hey, you like this coffee mug here? You could buy a similar one for $20. When I say that, you immediately understood what I meant. $20 made sense to you. I didn't have to go into a long-winded explanation. I was like, well, it's worth approximately the same as 7 tacos, or it is worth as much as many hardbound books, or trying to make some sort of weird comparison to describe the actual value of that coffee mug in some sort of real terms, in terms of what it's worth, right? I can just say it's worth $20. But we already know, we've established that money is not what you want. You want what money can get you. So $20 doesn't really have worth. We just understand that as a unit of account, $20 has a value that we all get. And that's powerful. That is really powerful thing, because I can instantly communicate, and by the way, not just instantly, but efficiently communicate down to the penny what something is worth. How much more productive are we as consumers and producers simply because of the ability to instantly and accurately assess and communicate value? It's a big deal. If you don't think so, go to a swap meet and try to haggle over trading your lawnmower for a bunch of kitchenware. You're sitting there trying to figure out, well, how many pots and pans is the equivalent value to a riding lawnmower? You could argue all day and still be pretty unclear. However, if you label pots and pans $300, riding lawnmower $300, we have eliminated that entire discussion, and instantly we move on with the transaction. This is a big deal. But I think I've made my point, so I will move on. So if something satisfies those 3 things, a medium of exchange, a store of value, and a unit of account, then it is money. Our money, moving on to this last point here, is called fiat money. And the technical name is inconvertible fiat standard currency. Okay, and that does sound like a car. Think about it for a second. It's not a car, though. What we're saying here is that our money is not convertible into anything else, and what we're really talking about here is gold. Okay, we do not have money that is backed by gold. Now, you are certainly welcome to use your money to purchase gold, but that is a different statement than saying I can convert my money into gold, because If I am purchasing gold, I'm buying it at a price that's subject to market forces. A currency that could be exchanged for a certain amount of gold is actually basing its value on an exchange rate with gold. Does that make sense? Now, is there a problem with this? My opinion, no, there's not. Lots of people maybe think there is. And let's discuss, why might there be a problem? Well, the obvious answer is, why is our money worth anything? Oh, just because it's backed by the full faith and credit of the United States government. That's true. Like, the only thing that makes our money worth something is because we all agree it's worth something. Well, then maybe we should back it with gold, and that would make it, that would really mean it was actually worth something, right? Well, let's discuss why gold is valuable. And it's not because it's rare, because it's actually not all that rare. It's not because it's very useful, although it has some uses. It's very good for making jewelry because it doesn't rust, it's easy to work with, and it's, shiny. But that's a kind of a limited use. And yes, in modern history with high tech, it is good conductor of electricity. And so in some of your high tech electronic components, you're going to use gold wiring. Okay, that's pretty limited. None of this goes to explain why people have always been obsessed with gold. And the reasons we've all been obsessed with gold for so long are varied, and I'm not going to get into them on the online version of this because I want to just get you through the lesson. But the bottom line is, if you think about it real hard, gold is really valuable because we think it's valuable. That's why. We all agree it's valuable. So if we already all agree that U.S. currency is valuable because it's backed by the full faith and credit of the United States government, do we really need to be able to convert it into gold, which is valuable just because we agree it's valuable? It's not really any point. And that's one argument. That's my argument. Free to disagree. So what I'm suggesting, though, is that economists found out a while ago that it didn't make a lot of sense to them either to hang on to the gold standard, when what it really served to do was make it more difficult to manipulate the money supply and accomplish what can be accomplished through monetary policies if you are also worrying about backing up all of your money supply with some certain amount of gold. So it added a cumbersome step to what will be known to you as monetary policy very shortly. And so that was rejected, and we went off of the gold standard in the 20th century, in the 70s. So let's go ahead and move on to the next slide here. Let's think about where money comes from. And where it comes from is the Federal Reserve System. And the Federal Reserve is a monopoly. It is the sole supplier of U.S. currency in the world. Okay? It's important. And what you need to realize is that that's by design. And I know that we're often taught to resist monopoly, think that monopoly is a bad thing. And generally, in terms of markets, it is a bad thing because it hurts competition, etc. But we don't want competition for the value of our money. We want to know that our money is as valuable as we think it is. Let's imagine how difficult it would be to deal with having a money supply that there were more than one suppliers of. Someone else could conceivably, from the outside, simply produce a lot of your money and cause inflation. Right? Just crash your economy. In fact, there's very recently, publicly, a big controversy over what was known as black money in India because Pakistan was accused of having state-run counterfeit operations creating Indian rupees, which hurt the stability of the rupee, and there were policies enacted to overcome that interference. So understanding that the Fed has monopoly control over the money supply, is actually going to be a really good thing for us, because when we start to talk about monetary policy, we're essentially talking about manipulating the money supply in order to counter the business cycle. So we're really just talking about what the Fed does as the controller of the money supply. Let's look at this very last thing on the slide here. Any change in the money supply is a result of Fed policy, not Congress. And I say, well, sort of, because Congress has to authorize the Federal Reserve Bank to increase the money supply. And that's what all of these debt limit conversations are about, because issuing money is the same as issuing debt. And let's take a moment to explain that to ourselves real quick. So first, let's talk about what the Fed is. It is a banking system. There's several Federal Reserve banks throughout the country. There's one in Dallas. That'd be the closest one to us now. And the main one is on Wall Street in New York City. It is a bank that is not something that you could open an account with, but really it's often referred to as the bank's bank. It is the bank that that other banks like Bank of America or Citi or Chase or Wells Fargo, they have accounts with the Fed. And we'll get more into who the Fed is later when we get into monetary policy, but it's worth noting now because I'm beginning to say this and that about the Fed. So I just want you to know that the Fed is the Federal Reserve Bank, and it's not part of the government. However, it is chartered by the government. So when the Fed does certain things, they do need permission to do them. And that's where I want to leave that discussion for now. So when we're talking about the actual money supply, there are a few different measures that we actually use. We can count up how much money is out there, but what we are calling money changes. Now, there's a term called liquidity, and what that means is spendability. That's pretty much a good explanation. Liquid money is money that can be spent. I might own $1 million house, but I can't spend that $1 million unless I sell that house, right? So the house has value, but it's not liquidity. It's not liquid value. So the most liquid money that we can measure is physical currency, coin currency, and actually demand deposits. And demand deposits is just the money that you have deposited in your bank account that you could swipe a card and spend. So if I have a handful of change, I can spend that money. If I have dollar bills, I can spend that money, and that's the difference between coin and currency, by the way. Currency is paper money, coin is coins. And also, if I have a card with attached to a bank account, I can spend that money pretty easily too. And that all of those things together, you're checking in some of your savings accounts, along with the actual cash money and coins that are out there, that is the M1 supply of money, and that is liquid money, spendable money. There's several other counts of money, but I'm just going to go over the next one, which is M2 with you, because I really just want to illustrate to you how, as we go into different measures of the money supply, they tend to get bigger as a measure of the money supply, but they also get less liquid. So you would add M1 with things called time deposits, which are things like a CD where you can't take the money out for a certain amount of time. Obviously, you can't spend it now, right? It's less liquid. Money market mutual funds, you're going to have to move some things around and let those funds transfers clear before you can spend it. Overnight Eurodollars, which is simply money held in accounts overseas. This is money that can be spent pretty quickly. Give me a day or two and I can spend that money, but I can't spend it now, right? That's the difference between M1 and M2. And as we continue to do these other supplies of money, and if you're interested, you can easily Google different counts of the money supply. There's several, and you'll get into things like real estate, property, that you don't consider to be money, but certain measures of the money supply might consider that to be money. The main point in this course for us is that when we talk about the money supply, we are talking about the M1 supply of money. Okay, we're talking about cash, coin, and demand deposits in the bank. there's this concept called the time value of money, which is something we've pretty much been aware of for a long time in this course, which is that as money sits around, it loses value because of inflation. So because of inflation, there is a cost to not spending or investing your money now. If I just put my money under my bed, I'm losing the ability to spend it, and I'm also losing the ability to spend it now while it's worth more than it's ever going to be worth again, because it's always subject to inflation. So when you are going to lend somebody money, if you're a bank, this is why that construct that I've gone over quite a few times, which is the expected rate of inflation added to what you want to make as profit, which is real interest, equals the nominal interest rate. That's where all this comes from, because I am giving up something if I let you borrow my money. If I let you borrow my money, I am not able to spend it now. Of course, there's a cost there. But also, I'm not going to be able to spend it until you give it back. And when you give it back, it will be worth less than it was worth today. So I have to make you pay me back a little more. Now, if I just want to do you a favor and lend you money for quote unquote for free, if I'm not going to make any profit, I still am going to lose money if I don't at least charge you the rate of expected inflation. So even to let you borrow money for free, I would still charge you the rate of inflation, because I want you to at least give me back what I gave you. There's a lot on this slide about simple versus compound interest, and it's actually not critical for us in this course. So I don't want to dwell on it. I have not seen AP tests really want to ask you to calculate interest rates. And I also know that this is something you've done in other math classes. So a little bit of a refresher on what this is, but we're going to move through it pretty quickly. So simple interest is the rate of interest based only on the amount borrowed, which is the principal, and it ignores the interest charge on the interest over time. And that's opposed to compound interest, where you're charged interest on what you've borrowed, but then you're also charged interest on the interest you've already accrued, and that's more in line with reality and what we actually see with lending. Okay, calculating it, again, this is not something I think you'll be expected to do, but you have done in the past. Here's your variables, V being the future value of the money, P is the present value, R real interest rate, N number of years, K number of times the interest is credited per year. And you give yourself some formulas here. Like I said, I'm not too interested in you memorizing these formulas. And here's a practice that you are welcome to pause and work your way through if you like. There you have it. Another practice. Pause it now, work through it if you like. Like I said, I've never seen you have to do this on an FRQ. You may be asked the difference between simple interest and compound interest, but I doubt that you will be asked to calculate, do a problem similar to these. But again, here's another one you could pause now and work your way through. All right, let's see what we come up with. And finally, we get to something I do want you to know, which is something called the quantity theory of money. And the theory states that nominal GDP equals the money supply times the velocity of money. Well, I told you what the money supply is. That is M1. I know down here it says M1 or M2. We're really focusing on M1 in this course. But what is this velocity of money? And I'll tell you now, the velocity of money is the rate at which money is spent in the economy. Okay? It is how many times per year a dollar is spent. That's really what it is. And what's I guess important for you to know is that it is something that changes over time, but it changes slowly enough that we can actually hold it as a constant. We can treat it like a constant. We just need to reevaluate it every once in a while. And this equation right here is the big thing I need you to remember. You have to memorize this and associate it with the quantity theory of money. And the quantity theory of money states that the money supply times the velocity of money equals price level times real GDP, which is to say that it equals nominal GDP. Okay, so money supply times the velocity of money equals nominal GDP. And what's the point there? Why is this important? Well, what this is telling us is that I actually don't like that graphic much. I'm going to keep it here, and we're going to end here. But what this tells us is that by manipulating the money supply, right, because we've got two variables on this side, we've got one variable on this side, which is nominal GDP. Simply by manipulating the money supply, if the velocity of money is constant, we can manipulate nominal GDP. That's pretty much what this tells us. It gives a little bit of an underpinning to the theory that we're going to get into starting next time behind monetary policy. Manipulating the money supply and seeing that lead to an effect in GDP. So understand that the quantity theory of money is the money supply times velocity of money equals nominal GDP. And that's pretty much it for the day. So what we talked about here was a definition of what money is. We talked about how the Federal Reserve Bank is the sole supplier of U.S. currency, and we talked about how the velocity of money works in terms of what what it means and what the equation is that goes with it. And it's knowing that equation that goes with it that's the important part, which is that money supply times the velocity of money equals nominal GDP. And I almost forgot to mention that we talked about earlier the time value of money, which is to say that over time money loses value because of inflation. So that's it for today. Happy studying, and I'll see you next time.